Sport Business. Global Sports Intelligence.
Hello and welcome to the Sport Business Podcast. I'm John Rest, Chief Correspondent for Sport Business, and with me, as always, Martin Ross, Editor-in-Chief of Sport Business News, who is in Glasgow, as he always is, but with the added addition of the Commonwealth Games in town. This week in the newsroom, we will, of course, look at the latest controversial announcement by FIFA President Gianni to privatise part of the World Cup. We'll also look at a big new rights deal in Canada and the latest tenders in Africa and South Korea for football. Inside the deal, we will look at a new brand, Stripe, and their moves in two major sports properties. And as always, the podcast will end with a look at the week ahead and any other business. Martin, welcome this week to the podcast. You are in Glasgow. How's it been?
Hello, John. I am indeed. Can you hear hubbub? There's a lot of hubbub.
I can hear background hubbub.
Yes, that is Commonwealth Games hubbub. I am in the media hubbub. That's where I am. We're not on field of play, just before anybody gets excited. We're very much not on the field of play right now. But we're close to the bowls, basketball, boxing, venues, and judo, which starts on Friday. Beside the media hub, there's a whole bunch of judokas with their suitcases strewn all over the floor. They're all getting ready in the corridor to check in. Why do you have to check in while wearing your judo gear? So the basketball is taking place at the moment where the judo will, so they don't have a kind of back of house. So they're all getting changed in the corridor, which is quite entertaining. Clothes on, clothes off, which is maybe mixing my martial arts film metaphors there. But yes, it's going well. Well, we'll discuss that later. Is it going well? Big discussion.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk more about the Commonwealth towards the end of the podcast, because I know you've been speaking to people on the ground there as well. So let's probably move on to the obvious topic, which is FIFA and the World Cup.
Yeah, it's, I think a reckoning is coming. A reckoning's been coming for a while between UEFA and FIFA. Everybody will know what the details of the proposal are, I'm sure, by now. But what is unknown, I suspect, is the bit that's more threatening. Does this mean a World Cup every 2 years? Does it mean 64 teams? What else does it mean? I just feel that we are in line for some kind of crash coming, and it's a question of how many European nations, I think, now want to stand up to this. Notice that the Czech FA has actually backed it and into Sky News, but coming off the back of, the World Cup we've had, the Balogun red card suspension, how that affected the Belgian FA, I think the Norwegian FA had something to say about that as well. Rising tensions. If UEFA nations can stand up together, then it paves the way. I mean, how do you see this playing out now? What happens next?
Well, as you say, UEFA have got a meeting they called for this week. We understand that will be on Friday, so we're recording this Wednesday. They were quick to put that out there. They are obviously going to be the most vocal opponent of this. Potentially because most of their members have got a bit more cash than the other associations where this will appeal. If you look at who's come out, CONCACAF came out, the Asian Football Confederation came out, but not really criticising the plan as such. More, we weren't kind of invited to discuss this. I think that's what's annoyed a lot of people in the football industry. UEFA have come out a bit more strongly, as you said. EFC, which is, used to be European Club Association, have come out very against it. You can imagine FIFPro. I saw a statement earlier on the day that they're obviously concerned. As you mentioned there, what does it mean? Does it mean a World Cup every 2 years? And therefore FIFPro are concerned about the impact that will have on player welfare. I think it is coming to a head. But, if you look at, and I've seen the letter that Gianni Infantino has sent to all of the member associations, it's very strongly worded, as you can imagine, and it's really putting the pressure on. These member associations, of which there's 211, have been given until the 19th of September to make up their mind. And they've been promised $20 million if they do that from January. In addition, there'll be more money coming through over the next 12 years, totaling, I think, including that original 86 million euros over a 12-year period. Now, in this letter from Mr. Infantino, it says this compares to the 3 million received over the same time before my election. Worth a caveat that the next FIFA election is in March, so we know that cash sells, and it's doing a lot of the work here in his letter.
Yeah, that 3 million might be doing a heavy lifting. We don't really know details on that either as to where he's where that figure's come from. The timing is crucial, as you say. The reports, and obviously a nod to the Times and the Financial Times that ran something initially where that he would take on some kind of commissioner role, which would, I presume, mean he could stay beyond his existing term within the broader FIFA family and retain power, albeit maybe not as FIFA president. In a very simplistic way, I kind of looked at it, and in a way, people are outraged at the thought of private equity investment in an international federation commercial subsidiary, yet that's what so many international properties have done. And with, good governance and the money coming in to fund, they hope, growth, but there's not always a return on investment, then, you can take that at face value. What you can't take here at face value is everything else that may come to pass in terms of influence. And particularly off the back of the World Cup, particularly off the back of who's been mentioned as potential investors as to what that could lead to. So, I understand the frustration fully. I don't think I don't feel FIFA being listened to at all by the sort of international football community for years now, and I don't think that's going to hold any weight at all. I think only thing that can hold weight is 6 of your top world teams saying that they're not going to take part in this. Then that will affect the investor appetite. It affects the plans. So the next few days, I think, will be crucial, as you say, because there's such a tight timeline on when this has to be decided by before the election.
Yeah, it is. That is. And I think it's almost looked at from a lot of the teams, from a lot of these member associations where, it is a hell of a lot of money that they're going to be getting, way more than they could probably had envisioned and wished for. And they've been given a very short time frame to go, well, do you want the money or not? And if you don't, then fine, we'll go back to earning, a much smaller amount. I mean, the letter from Infantino kind of ends, it's up to you whether we accept this proposal. If you proceed, we'll have a $10 billion package from January the 27. If you want to retain the status quo, we'll have 2.7 billion. It's the wording of it, and we can do great things together kind of thing. I think you're right, the players will be ignored. I mean, they were ignored when they, about more European club competition football. So I don't think, ECA or EFC have really got a leg to stand on here either. But where does this go? Is UEFA brave enough to take a proper stand on this? I think you mentioned last week, didn't you, when we did the wrap-up of the World Cup, that there's been previous issues around governance of FIFA, and some of it actually more kind of South American FAs that had execs that were on FIFA's board, so it was kind of indirectly linked to FIFA. That was kind of the business side of it. People that weren't that fussed when it came onto the football, you could differentiate between the FIFA World Cup and FIFA as an organisation. That is getting kind of increasingly hard to do now. Balogun, we didn't really touch on much because it's not really our area of expertise. It's not essentially a commercial story, but it did annoy punters essentially because it was directly influencing a game of football. And I think when you start talking about, the stories are privatising the World Cup, it's not quite that, is it? It's 20% of a commercial vehicle. But the semantics don't look good, and I think that is going to cause even more of an issue. Does it embolden somebody to stand up against him at the election next year in Morocco? Potentially, but if this gets accepted and you've got 54 nations in Africa that seemingly are behind Infantino, 40-odd in Asia, potentially the same. Europe's 50-odd does not look strong enough to do anything about this. And then you get into what is this private equity buying into? What do they foresee? I think the current quadrennial is, I think it's around 15 billion, of which the World Cup is 13 billion. And then you've got, Club World Cup, a few other things in there as well. What are they going to do to get that valuation up to what they see as 20? How do you find that extra money? Expansion of Club World Cup isn't obvious, isn't it?
It's not just the FIFA World Cup, I don't think, that it would represent. I think I'm right in saying, would it represent commercial rights to all FIFA properties? It's all
FIFA properties. But really you're talking Men's World Cup, and the Club World Cup is something that obviously they've seen growth in. I mean, we had this story 8 years ago, was it, when they had a SoftBank were involved in a bid to
Well, I mean, that's the thing. That if you go back over Infantino's periods in office, then, this has been a common theme in terms of raising investment for FIFA IP, SoftBank consortium for a more regular expanded Club World Cup was one, didn't come to pass. Then FIFA Plus was another, sort of trying to sell FIFA Plus, which in the end, DAZN struck a deal for essentially to transfer the assets of FIFA Plus exclusively onto DAZN. That was around the same time of the deal for the Club World Cup rights at close to $1 billion. So it's not an unusual practice for him to want to do it. And as I said, on the face of it, trying to raise investment into your sport, you could, in all good faith, be okay with. But where does the valuation come from? It's slightly ambiguous to me as to whether it's a valuation FIFA is putting on this, or it's whether it's claiming that the offers they have from investors are creating this valuation. FIFA certainly has form in terms of big asking prices. And then if that is to be somewhat sullied as well by doubts over who's going to be taking part, then it will be an interesting sort of investment conversation over the next few months as to whether they can get it done. But I just feel that everything's been moving for the last couple of years now. Associations aligning with FIFA, confederations aligning with FIFA, CONMEBOL, run by a president who has his own FIFA presidential aspirations. Jeffrin's been pretty clear as to what his thoughts are. We're in line for seismic change, whether that's a more frequent World Cup backed by private equity money, or whether that's a real redressing of balance maybe in global football. But there's no sign to me that Infantino will let up.
No, I agree. I think, and if you look again at, it's the type of investor, isn't it? It's how this is all played out. Cloak and dagger meetings, not talking openly about these plans. It looks almost like a fait accompli, and then you're almost forcing the members just to support you. It doesn't even suggest there's going to be an official vote. The wording is very much, we need majority support. So, I think this is just I'd say it was going to run and run, but there is a definitive timeline on this, which is 19th of September.
It does feel slightly back to front. Yeah, saying how
absolutely.
much you are going to distribute to associations before the investment deal on the face of it is struck. Coming out with this before you've informed as they claim, they've not been informed, the confederations or associations, albeit, when did this letter go out, though? Did that go out to associations?
I've seen it as of today. I think it went out, I believe it went out today. Yeah, or late last night, but certainly not before that. Everyone was blindsided by this. They saw it in, as you say, the Times or the FT. I think the Times had a bit more detail, so kudos to the guys that broke that. But the responses from everyone has been in relation to the media publication, and then a letter has gone off the back of that.
Anyway, moving on from one behemoth to another, Amazon, John. Amazon's done a 12-year deal for NHL rights, which we did actually preview. Catherine Davis previewed in Sport Business Media that it would be coming. They've switched out their games from Monday to Wednesday night, NHL in Canada. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, fair play to Catherine. She did this a month or so ago with, identifying that Wednesday was what they wanted, largely because they have Monday at the moment and it clashes with the NFL's Monday night games. So you're kind of losing a chunk of your audience there. So they've gone for the Wednesday. It's 26-27 to 37-38. So it's their longest sports right deal to date, we understand. So they've done the NBA rights are 11 years. They also have a NFL deal, which I think is also 11 years. So, yeah, clearly here to stay. Rogers needed this as well. I think we've talked about this before. They did this mammoth deal and needing to sublicense it to bring some money back in. We know they're not going to be doing that with the public broadcaster CBC. They've aired NHL, I think Hockey Night in Canada for, I can't even work out, 80, 90 years or something like that. First radio and then television. They're not going to be around anymore. So, yeah, this was an expected deal. But, yeah, 12 years perhaps was the surprise.
Yeah, I would encourage listeners and readers of Sport Business Media to have a look at Catherine's feature, which we will put in the notes. A real landmark change for the Canadian broadcast market, that as the discussion continues around the role of Amazon and Netflix as in the landscape there and whether they are taxed or not, another story that she has written. But yeah, a fair old deal that, and another UEFA Champions League deal, which we've written about exclusively this week. We have to give it a nod because the boss wrote it. Imran did it.
He's written the story that Coupang have netted Champions League rights in South Korea. Yeah. So 4-year deal, 27 to 31. They already have Premier League rights too.
That's right, yeah. Eklat Spo TV is the incumbent, so a change there in Korea. Imran's written a news story about it. I believe there may be a feature coming, so look out for that. The rights sales move on. Slightly smaller potatoes, Baltic potatoes. There was a tender there at the beginning of this week. So bids coming in, maybe a slightly less exciting market in terms of competition after Viaplay's exit a couple of years ago. But yes, the deals continue to be done. And a deal that may well be done at long last is at the end of the latest tender for CAF, which we won't get into the weeds of, but CAF have decided to reissue their agency tender, having gone to market last year, having come very close to appointing IMG. The eagle-eyed among you will have noticed Robert Klein and Adam Kelly on the TV at the Afcon final beside the CAF higher echelons. So yeah, they have gone back to market. Essentially, last time the goalpost did really move because during the tender process, it was decided that the Afcon would become no longer biennial but quadrennial, which would affect, what you'd bid for, among all sorts of other dynamics going on at the time. So they've come out with a new tender just for Afcons, 3 Afcons and the qualifiers, and the deadline is next month. So we will do a deeper dive on that, I'm sure, online.
Excellent. That's it. It's good, a global tour of football and a little bit of Canadian ice hockey. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will be joined by Ben Cronin.
From private equity to global media and US college sports, unlock the most trusted data and insights in our reports. Explore more at sportbusiness.com.
Welcome back to the Sport Business Podcast for the second part, Inside the Deal. I'm joined by Ben Cronin, editor of Sport Business Sponsorship. Ben, we're going to do something a little bit different this week. Rather than talk about a specific deal, we want to talk about a brand that have done a couple of deals, because there's someone I hadn't really heard of. Can you talk us through the recent stories you've done and who this brand is?
Hi guys, the brand in question is called Stripe. Well, the genesis of this story is we ran a piece at the end of last year. It's notoriously dangerous business for a journalist to make predictions about what's going to happen in the year ahead. As you both know, it's got the potential for you to be left with egg on your face in about 12 months when none of the predictions come true. But happily, this one did come true. So we ran a piece looking at, we called them IPO-ready brands to watch in 2026. Stripe was on that list because at the time they were giving signals that they were going to IPO. And our rationale was that if they're going to IPO, then they're going to be awash with cash. And a lot of companies post-IPO like to sponsor sport because it sends a signal of confidence to investors. So that was our rationale. They didn't IPO in the end. They actually put out a tender offer instead. But there were other buying signals that they were giving. One was they ran a job advert towards the end of last year asking for a head of brand marketing. And that said that the person in question would be responsible for the company's global sponsorship programs. So there were a couple of signals we picked up. We put them on that list. And lo and behold, they've now agreed a couple of deals. So our colleague Matt Williams, senior reporter on Sport Business Sponsorship, was the first to break the news of them announcing their first deal. That was, in fact, this one's yet to be announced. He said they were going to do a deal with Mercedes F1. That, as I say, hasn't been officially announced yet, but our understanding is that's going to take effect at the start of the 2027 season. So that's them breaking their sponsorship duck. And then last week, I got wind that they were planning to do a deal with the Ryder Cup as well. And that one has been officially announced. So yeah, there's a sense of gathering momentum with Stripe.
And Ben, tell me about the strategy. I mean, going from a kind of back-end service provider in sport and other areas, but going from that to wanting to get their name out there, I suppose, why the change? Why sports sponsorship now and that kind of shift for Stripe?
I get the sense, and we don't know the full strategy yet because the Mercedes deal hasn't even been announced yet. And you normally get indications of what they're up to from the announcement, but reading the tea leaves and looking at the Ryder Cup press announcement, there was a lot about them. I mean, they're a payments infrastructure company. In layman's terms, they do the plumbing for business enterprises, the payments plumbing, allowing them to deliver e-commerce services, subscriptions, that type of thing. There was a reference in the press release to them performing those functions for the Ryder Cup. And they've done this before. So when we did our prediction about them, we noted the fact that they've been working with Swimming Australia. They'd done something, I think, with the Gaelic Athletic Association, I think it was, and also with Decathlon. So they've been doing the sort of the back end stuff for sports for a while. I think now what they want to do is they want to sort of shout about it a bit more. So they'll be looking for case studies. badging and IP. I think, this type of deal, it's about making something that maybe isn't very accessible and interesting a little bit more accessible, using sport as the kind of gateway to tell a story about a product, a very technical product.
Put your future gazing hat on, Ben. Is that such a thing? I don't know. Where else do you think they'll go? I mean, is golf and F1 an indication of a particular audience that they're looking to target, or do you see them branching out into, I mean, you mentioned swim in Australia, they're a very different type of deal, but a different demographic. Do you see them, moving into other sports as well?
So they've since put out a new job advertisement since we picked that one at the end of last year. They're recruiting for a sports sponsorship marketing program manager. And that advert suggested that they're going to do a host of new deals. So the exact wording was that this person needs to drive a multi-pronged sports sponsorship program across multiple sports, teams, global execution, and dozens of sporting events. So the signs are, it's not just going to stop at golf and F1. I mean, you can see the logic in those deals. Those are classic. F1 especially is a classic playground for payment services brands. And then with the golf deal, you can see the rationale. I mean, they've got dual headquarters. They're based in Ireland and they're based in San Francisco. And the next edition of the Ryder Cup is in Adair Manor in Ireland. Martin will probably know where the one after that is in the US, but I can't remember the exact name of the golf course. But there's a sort of a dual footprint there, which makes that one make sense. And you can understand as well that they're probably trying to access the other brands in the portfolio and maybe persuade them to integrate their payment services.
In your piece, you mentioned that the company is valued at something ridiculous, $160 billion. Obviously, it's very early in terms of the stories that you and Matthew have been writing. I guess you're still kind of working through sources. Have we got any indication on how much they're spending on these sponsorship deals? Or is it too early to say?
So we've heard different figures. I mean, it's too early to say. We haven't corroborated the info for the Mercedes deal, but I've heard that's 20 million plus. That could be in a range between 20 and 30 million. Based on what we know about existing Ryder Cup deals, I'd say that one is probably, around the half of the Mercedes figure. If you're talking 20 million plus for Mercedes, then you're probably talking about $10 million for the Ryder Cup per edition of the Ryder Cup. But I don't know that for a fact yet. That's what my gut's telling me on those deals. Yeah, and as you say, valued at 159 billion. So they're one of those companies that you've never heard of, which is absolutely huge. I mean, there's another stat which says that they're generating 1.9 trillion in volume in 2025. The stat was that that's equivalent to roughly 1.6 of GDP, global domestic product. So pretty big company.
We've touched on it there in terms of the sports that they'd be interested in. But I mean, as a kind of service provider, they're not going after eyeballs, I presume, given that they're back end and not. I mean, I actually stumbled across them the other night when I was paying for something. I saw the logo popped up when I was putting my card details in, but they won't be going after the general public's business, I presume. How does that influence maybe where they want to go? Does F1, does golf, does it lend itself to maybe the hospitality angle of networking with people they want to do business with? Or how could that play out? Are you able to speculate on that?
Yeah, it would be speculation, but you would think, B2B platforms would be the most logical area. I mean, the fact that you saw the logo says that there is a bit of a consumer aspect, perhaps, about trust. You want to know that your payment, when you make it, is actually going to arrive. And, you've got that sort of security of knowing that the payment is being handled by a reputable payment service provider. But you would think the B2B aspect, the hospitality aspect of it is a big thing about this. And F1 and golf, well, we ran a survey 2 years ago, and F1 and the PGA Tour were voted the best B2B networking platforms by our readers. So there is an intuitive link there. It makes sense from that perspective. I'm trying to think of other B2B platforms that would work well. I mean, possibly...
Maybe not darts.
No, or Premier League football. Although, weirdly, a lot of B2B brands are getting into Premier League football at the moment. A few of the new furniture deals are B2B platforms, although arguably they've got a sort of a consumer element as well.
Ben, before we let you go, a nice little nugget in your story. Ryder Cup European team used to be reliant on German players, less so now, and they're not going to be reliant on a German car brand anymore. What's going on with BMW?
Yeah, BMW are out, which is pretty seismic, I think. Just think about the connection between BMWs and golf. I mean, just go to any golf club and you see the number of BMWs in the car park, it's just, there's this natural fit between them. We had a feeling for a long time that they weren't going to renew because we heard of other German automotive brands, I won't say who, that were sniffing around looking at the rights. The big question about that now is what's going to happen to the wider deal with the DP World Tour. And they've also got a deal with the PGA Tour, which is title sponsor of BMW Championship on the PGA Tour. So there's a wider commitment there. Both of those deals don't expire until 2027. So, question marks about BMW. They've issued profit warnings recently, and I saw that they cut their 2026 EBIT margin in June. That's down to 1 to 3%, which was previously 4 to 6%. And they're blaming weakening sales in China for that. So it seems very similar to what's happening to a lot of European car brands at the moment. They're downgrading their expectations. Seems like a lot of them have been caught on the back foot by the transition to electric vehicles, the arrival of these big Chinese car brands, and BMW is not immune from that. I mean, Mercedes is possibly the only one that's bucked that trend because they've just done that massive deal with the WTA. They've also done a deal with the WSL. So they seem to be sort of spending their way through it, whereas BMW giving signs that it might be retrenching a little bit.
Quiz question to end. Ben, I know you hate a quiz question. 2 Germans to play in the Ryder Cup ever?
Martin Keimer and I'm trying to think of a more recent one than that. Is it post Keimer or pre Keimer? Bernhard Langer. Bernhard Langer.
That was the warm-up question, though. Who's the only Austrian to play in the Ryder Cup?
Oh,
Straka.
Straka, yeah.
Oh, actually, no, there's 2. Sorry, there's 2. Straka, you're right, and Bernd Wiesberger. There we go.
Oh, that's before my time, Martin.
That sounds quite painful, a Bernd Wiesberger. Anyway, Ben, thank you for your time. Appreciate you joining us and giving us the lowdown on a new brand to watch out for. We will take a break and we'll be back with some musings from Glasgow.
Stay ahead in the business of sport with trusted news, data and analysis across media rights, sponsorship and more. Explore our subscription options at sportbusiness.com.
Welcome back to the third and final part of the Sport Business Podcast. Martin, last week we previewed the Commonwealth Games, and I think we were talking about ticketing in particular, maybe some of the struggles they've had. And have you seen many of the tartan army at the bowls or whatever it might be? How's it been going?
I have actually seen a tartan army, but not the one you think of. It's the Lesotho's tartan army. Did you know Lesotho has a tartan army?
I did not know. I think I even used to call them Lesotho, so I didn't even know how you pronounce it. So there you go. I learned
so
2 things today.
I was going to say they're fans at the boxing. It wasn't really their fans because they were all accredited. It was their delegation. They had tartan bonnets on, and they've actually wonderfully started wearing tartan sleeves on their official Commonwealth Games jackets because Lesotho has its own tartan, believe it or not. So they were very noisy. They were brilliant at the boxing. They won the show for their songs and getting a bit of atmosphere into the boxing because has it been lacking? I suppose maybe a little bit. Depends on the sport you go to. We did talk about the ticketing last week and the lack of buzz, which continues to be an issue. There's a lot of free tickets flying around, whether that be obviously the Tartan Army ones, but handouts to staff, national governing bodies. We did a story on Thursday last week. After the opening press conference, netball tickets were available for £8. Bulls weightlifting is a bit of a struggle. But then again, these are sports, whose world championships do not get stellar crowds. And then they've decided to take netball for 21 sessions across 9 days into the hydro, which is over 10,000 capacity. So, there's a level of understanding why. More concerning to me would be the athletics and some gaps you're seeing there. Maybe less so last night. When I say last night, I mean Tuesday night when there was biblical rain. So lots of people had to leave their seats just because it was that wet. But 2014, 44,000 at Hampden was sold out all 7 days. That was sold out by November 2013, all of the tickets. So we'll see. The track cycling starts Thursday. It's sold out. The swimming is nearly sold out. I went there on Monday night. It was a good vibe. It was very similar to Glasgow 2014. The presentation was good. It was just a clean presentation, pretty well attended. Even the netball, on Saturday, England were playing Australia, Scotland playing New Zealand. You saw a lot of families there that were taking their kids. They knew it was on. There's just not the same glow as there was around Glasgow 2014, which obviously came off the back of London 2012. And there's not the same awareness, really. If you knew it was on, yeah, you've got involved, or people are aware, but maybe not the same appetite to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it last week, and I admit I've really not seen much of it because it is not that much more difficult to find. I'm not that lazy, but just having it available on the BBC with all the cold shoulder programming around it, you couldn't really miss it. I don't feel like I'm getting that on, I've seen bits of TNT's coverage. Every time I turn over, it seems to be an advert, which isn't ideal, but that's just me. Doesn't help, I guess. Have they addressed that at all?
Yeah, the TNT stuff, well, one of the TNT stuff's ad heavy, but you can actually get the streams of the different events and you can get the multi-screen, which isn't interrupted in the same way, which is good. The viewing figures for the opening ceremony will tell you everything you need to know. Channel 5's opening ceremony peaked at 950,000. There was an average of 50,000 on TNT Sports 2. The peak at Glasgow 2014 was 9.4 million. There were also ads run through the Channel 4 ceremony, so 5 or 6 ad breaks during an opening ceremony is an own goal to me if you're wanting to get people on board watching a games and then all of a sudden you've got ad breaks. So you didn't get a chance to see Lesotho's tartan sleeves because there was an ad break. So they came back and we were on to another country. But there were signs by Birmingham. It was down to 5.2 million, the peak. So, the kind of dwindling appetite, I suppose, in the Commonwealth Games has been shown. Commonwealth Sport, because they're the ones that the broadcast deal, not the organising committee. They've been accused of an own goal, but how much is that an own goal when the BBC really did not put a serious bid in? The BBC for Birmingham, the number that goes around is 10 million that they spent on Birmingham. I actually understand it's a good chunk more than that because they wanted to fend off Channel 4. You'd be lucky if they bid a tenth of that, this time around. So it's that quandary. Do you take the hit on the BBC money and then not get the exposure? But we'll see. There's the same old bluster you get any multi-sports games. And Donald Rucari, the president of Commonwealth Sport, described these games as the cheapest and the best ever in the same press conference, which I quite enjoyed. I say a degree of humility. I did actually see Donald, where's your trousers? He wore a kilt in the opening ceremony with black and red colours for Kenya. So impressed by that. Also, degree of humility. I saw him in the Morrisons just doing his shopping in the middle of the day, which I don't think you would see Thomas back. He was buying a sandwich. I'm not sure what his per diem is, but I thought fair play to Donald, but I maybe don't quite understand his point on the games. Let's call it what it is. These will not be the best ever games. They are not as alive as Glasgow 2014, but the success of these games in many ways is the fact that there will be a games in 2030. So they are serving a purpose. Overall, there's been no major incidents as the transport seems to be working. They've been safe, they've been delivered. There's been some teething problems. There was a big Charles Rennie Macintosh rose, which was meant to be lifted and hanging from the Finniston crane before the opening ceremony. I don't think it got put in position until Sunday or on Monday. So there's been little things like that. The real actual overriding feeling among locals is that the city is not in good shape. And I was speaking to an Australian journalist who was furious about two things. She was furious that Australia was paying for this, but she was also furious about how much of a dump Glasgow looks like. And that is not on the organising committee. That is on Glasgow City Council, which is not putting money behind the games except for the festival. And you come to Glasgow and the main square is being renovated, but that was being renovated already, so they can't move that timeline. But it's just, there's a tunnel, you get a flyover to get to the games, SEC, and it's just really kind of dirty, and you get off the train, and all that stuff around the city has not been done in the same way as Glasgow 2014 has. So that's where the budget hit really impacts people and will impact maybe people coming back to the city. So we will see. We've got a few days left and we will see what the post-mortem is, and who does the post-mortem is really important. It's not being publicly revealed as to who will do the post-event evaluation because there's no public money. So as I said before, I think in the fullness of time we will begin to understand how these games have done from a commercial point of view. There's little signs that it's been quite challenging, but has been a success in the fact it's taken place and delivered.
Well, excellent. Enjoy the last few days. Make sure you get to plenty of bowls events before they stop. And get your Morrison sandwich.
I will. And apart from looking ahead to I'm going to go to the netball final actually on Sunday. So I hope you'll be looking ahead to that and the closing ceremony. I don't imagine you might be that excited about it, but I am. What are you looking ahead to apart from the Commonwealth Games, if that's possible?
Well, I have been watching a bit of the 100. I think we mentioned it the other week. A couple of games are on the BBC. My oldest is nearly 10 and he's got quite into his cricket, so he's been watching it. But I think reading a piece the other day, the attendances are down, for the first round of fixtures. We're down like 20% from last year, or 18%. It's not great when you consider this is the first, this is the 100 2.0, the new era, new team names, new colours, new owners. So I don't think they'll be too happy that the guys that have been buying into this private equity, again, Martin, come around full circle. Ticket prices, I understand, have gone up for some teams. I think up to standard price has gone from about £35 when the tournament began a few years ago to £55 now. So even accounting for inflation, that's a fair whack. So, talking about what to expect when private money comes in, ticket prices go up and things change. So I'd be interested to see whether it gets a little bit fuller, the stadiums. As the cricket's been great. I mean, like it's plenty of big hits, etc. What you expect, and the big name players. It's just the fans haven't quite turned up yet. So now the school holidays are in full throw. Hopefully, we'll be seeing full seats.
Who's your team, John?
Who's my team? It's a good question. I'm probably a London Spirit guy, Martin, being born close to London.
London Spirits guy.
Well, absolutely, yeah. They're probably my go-to team. But yeah, it'd be good to see it a bit fuller in the crowd. There's been plenty of chat about that. So I'm sure the teams will be looking at how better can they market this. Obviously, some of the teams, the ownerships weren't taken over and the new management teams, etc., maybe haven't had the full time that they would like to really put in place a full marketing campaign. So maybe next year's when we really see this relaunch. But I thought there would have been a few more in the crowd, shall we say?
Yes, a common theme.
Absolutely.
And before we close, can you enlighten us as to any other business that's been irritating you or titillating you?
Titillating, yes. Talking about things that Commonwealth Games you can watch, you just have to find it. Something that you can't watch on TV in the UK at the moment is Wafcon, not Afcon, the women's Afcon. A bit of a farce, this one. I don't know if you saw, Martin.
It's on YouTube, though, I think now, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Interesting kind of background story. So CAF put out an announcement last week, or end of last week, as all kind of tournament organisers do, going, this is where you can watch it. These are our, naming every broadcaster under the sun. And Channel 4 was listed as a rights holder. And then there was nothing on Channel 4's schedule. So there was a lot of disgruntled fans that tried to tune in Channel 4 to watch Wafcon and none of the games. So the assumption was that, the CAF had kind of made a faux pas and had just basically published the broadcast list from the men's Afcon. But in fact, Channel 4 do have the rights, we understand. They just decided not to show it yet. They may well do so for, the knockout rounds further on. So fans then tried to get onto the CAF YouTube channel, but it was geo-blocked in the UK because the rights belong to Channel 4. So then by all accounts, had to be a conversation between all parties, and eventually Channel 4 have allowed CAF to put it on the YouTube channel in the UK. So that is where you can go and get your Wafcon fix until perhaps Channel 4 finds some room in the schedules as the tournament progresses. But yeah, I found that quite funny. I
mean, this is the first iteration of the Wafcon, and not the tournament itself. But I can't remember it being called the Wafcon before.
No, I quite like it.
It seems to have cottoned on.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's basically you read it how it's spelled. So that Wafcon it is. So Fafcon, I think, the way this has been going on over the last few days. But yeah, that was my any other business.
Excellent. John, thank you for joining us. We will be back next week, but I would encourage everybody, as usual, to check out all our meaty features on Sport Business Media and Sport Business Sponsorship for accurate and up-to-date rights fees, and also on Sport Business for all the latest news stories and developments. Myself and John will be back next week with more from the sports industry. Thank you for joining us, and speak to you all soon.